Why did Victor Gideon infect his own care center? He could have at least protected the people working for him and his own building. Why does the Elpis vaccine work on Emily, but not on the girl? And finally, why doesn't Victor Gideon seem to care that Grace is constantly in mortal danger? Even though we know Grace is extremely important to his plans and could easily be killed by the zombies at any moment. In this video, join me as we dive deep into the hidden lore, mysteries, and unanswered questions of the game. Number 10. What did Victor Gideon do to himself? Prior to October 2026, Gideon implanted himself with the newly modified Nemesis Gang parasite in his chest, allowing him to retain his mind while gaining the strength and durability typical of Nemesis. Though it granted him increased strength and height, it also altered his appearance by causing his skin to become gray and mottled, as well as deteriorating his already precarious mental state. Also, apart from the virus he infected himself with, if I wanted to explain a little about his mask, I would have to say that Gideon also boasts a unique pair of goggles that allow him to examine his surroundings quickly, giving him important data on the fly. Another reason that he wears this mask is the same reason Wesker always wears his shades. Resident Evil bad guys gotta be stylin' and profilin'. Number 9. Why did Victor infect his care center building? Maybe you're wondering, like me, why Victor would infect his own care center and turn practically everyone who works there into zombies. Well, Victor Gideon activates Code 6 of the facility and unleashes the T-virus inside it in order to destroy all traces of evidence of his work there, sensing he had no further need for the care center. He believed Grace was the only one to whom Spencer had successfully transferred his memory, therefore he needed her because of the code stored in her mind. So when he brought her the care center, he thought he no longer needed the place or his experiments anymore. He was also certain that Leon would come after him to find Grace. So when he saw via the security cameras that Leon had entered the care center, he released the virus to get rid of the DSO agent Leon. Number 8. Is the commander actually HUNK? HUNK is never directly mentioned by name in Resident Evil Requiem, but many fans strongly believe that the character known as the Commander is actually HUNK, operating under a different identity. The theory mainly comes from the large number of similarities between them, such as their appearance, the same voice actor, and very similar combat finishers and movements. There are also many visual clues that support this idea. The commander constantly references death through his dialogue and equipment design, which matches HUNK's long-established Grim Reaper image. His combat style, especially moves like using a flashbang before instantly breaking an enemy's neck, feels extremely similar to HUNK's brutal and efficient fighting style. Even the flavor text of the Mortal Edge weapon seems closely connected to HUNK's philosophy and personality. What we officially know about HUNK is that he was present during the Raccoon City incident. Therefore, like Leon, he must have been affected by a mild form of the T-virus, or the so-called Raccoon City syndrome. This is also consistent with what we see. The black marks on his hands become clearly visible when his gloves are removed. From this, it can be inferred that the commander is actually HUNK himself, someone who, like us, was in Raccoon City and was later exposed to infection. Another important argument is HUNK's deep connection to Umbrella. Since the developers reportedly wanted Resident Evil Requiem to serve as the final closure of Umbrella's storyline, many fans believe HUNK was intentionally included in ARC so that his own story could finally end alongside the company he served for so long. Data mining discoveries have also made the theory more popular among fans. However, one major counterpoint remains. HUNK is generally considered to be around 65 years old, which raises doubts about whether he could still pose such a physical challenge to Leon. Because of this, some fans propose alternative explanations, such as cloning, given that he was one of Umbrella's elite mercenaries, or perhaps modification through experimental viruses that resulted in slowed aging or an almost ageless condition that has not yet been fully explained within the canon of the series. Number 7. Is Leon really married in Resident Evil Requiem? At first, fans noticed a ring on Leon's hand in the game's concept art, which immediately sparked countless rumors and theories about him being married. The biggest argument against the theory, however, was the fact that no ring could be seen on Leon's hand during the actual gameplay or in the in-game cutscenes. Eventually, the rumors started to fade away, until one particular moment reignited the entire discussion. In the game's final scene, after removing his gloves, Leon quietly takes out a ring from his pocket and slips it onto his finger. That single moment was enough to convince many fans that Leon truly is married. The speculation grew even stronger after the director of Resident Evil Requiem was reportedly said to have commented in an interview, "Leon Kennedy is married, but fans will have to wait to find out who he's married to." He then added, "The answer will become clear someday, but not just yet." Leon has a place to go home to, and we hope you can imagine the peaceful moments he spends there. Number 6. Why couldn't Zeno dodge Victor's attack despite his incredible powers? Honestly, this question usually comes from fans who didn't fully pay attention to the story, because if you properly followed the game's narrative, the answer becomes pretty clear. Zeno, who is essentially introduced as a clone of Wesker, gained all of his extraordinary abilities from the active virus inside his body. That virus made him unbelievably powerful. It allowed him to dodge bullets with superhuman reflexes and move through environments at incredible speed. Near the end of the game, Zeno injects himself with the Elpis, believing it would make him even stronger and grant him the ability to control people's minds. But there was one crucial thing he didn't know. Elpis was actually designed to eliminate every type of virus inside the host's body. So the moment he injects it into himself, Elpis acts like an antidote, destroying the virus within him. And with the virus gone, every enhancement it gave him disappears as well, including his superhuman reflexes and ability to dodge attacks. At that point, Zeno is no longer the unstoppable monster we saw earlier in the game. He becomes nothing more than an ordinary mortal human who has lost all of his powers. That's exactly why Victor is able to kill him so effortlessly with a single strike, while Zeno is completely unable to react or dodge the attack in time. Number 5. The most important Easter eggs in the game. The game is filled with Easter eggs and hidden details, but to avoid making the video too long, I'll only focus on the most important ones in this section. The first and newest Easter egg is Leon's name itself. After 30 years, the developers finally confirmed that the character's name was inspired by the iconic movie Leon the Professional. One of the reasons fans had already suspected this for years is because one of Leon's weapons in the game is named Matilda, the same name as the young girl from the film. Another Easter egg can be found on Leon Kennedy's personal car license plate. If you pay attention during scenes where Leon's car is shown, you can see the plate reads ND9642. This combination references the games where he played a major role. The next Easter egg appears in the VIP suite. While solving the puzzle to activate the elevator, you come across a wine bottle. The interesting part is that the bottle's brand is Sanguis Virginis, which is actually the same wine featured in Resident Evil Village. Even the label clearly references Chateau Dimitrescu, the castle of Lady Dimitrescu. There is also another clever reference to Resident Evil Village. At the beginning of Resident Evil Village, we saw Mia Winters reading a horror storybook to her baby daughter, Rose. The name of the book was Village of Shadows. Now in Resident Evil Requiem, Grace encounters a blind girl named Emily inside the care center. Interestingly, Emily is reading a Braille version of the exact same book, Village of Shadows. Another reference to Resident Evil Village can be found near the end of the game, in what is almost certainly Spencer's private study room inside the Ark. The room is nearly empty except for a single painting placed in a very special position, a woman holding a child, signed only with the letter M. Resident Evil 8 strongly implied that Spencer had a long history and friendship with Miranda, the main antagonist of the game. This painting is most likely a self-portrait of her. Also, when you enter the roads of Raccoon City with Leon, one of the cutscenes briefly shows the Misoil gas station where you can spot Leon's old vehicle parked outside. This is the exact same gas station where Leon parked in Resident Evil 2 before meeting Claire. Another fantastic Easter egg for longtime fans references the classic Resident Evil 2. Older fans may remember that by repeatedly checking Wesker's desk, players could eventually discover a photo of Rebecca Chambers wearing a sports outfit and holding a basketball. This Easter egg has now returned in Resident Evil Requiem. In another section of the game, inside the locker, players can discover several nostalgic items, including the classic Resident Evil disc for the PlayStation 1, Mega Man 8, Street Fighter Alpha 2, as well as a game console and a Street Fighter Alpha poster. Another interesting detail is the keychain attached to the key, which clearly has the name JoJo written on it. The game director later confirmed that this was a direct reference to the anime JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Even the Raccoon City zoo tickets hidden in the game are references to Resident Evil Outbreak. One more fun detail appears while exploring the RPD. You may encounter the adorable Tofu creature, a character that has been playable in several Resident Evil minigames over the years. You can find him either inside the operations room or in the hallway behind the waiting room. Most of the time when your back is turned toward the windows, Tofu secretly watches you with his signature funny sound effect. There are also many different charms scattered throughout the game, from the RPD charm to Claire Redfield's charm and even Albert Wesker's sunglasses. However, one of the most special charms is the cute bear charm because it references Ada Wong. If you have played Resident Evil 4, you probably remember that near the end of the game, Ada gives Leon a jet ski key with a small bear keychain attached to it. The game also contains many smaller details that are not necessarily Easter eggs, but are still very interesting. For example, lickers use their tongues to push zombies out of their way whenever they block their path. In another section of the game, you can even release a licker to attack the elite guards and eliminate them for you. Another small but impressive detail happens when you walk through blood while playing as Grace. You can actually see bloody footprints being left behind from her shoes. The game hides far more Easter eggs and interesting details than this, but to avoid making the video too long, I focused only on the most important and interesting ones. Number 4, a look into the backstory of the girl. You might find it interesting to know that this tall stalker creature constantly hunting you throughout the game was not always like this. A long time ago, during Umbrella Corporation's cloning experiments, 2 clones named Marie and Emily were created. Emily is the one we are all familiar with, as she plays a major role in the game's storyline. However, Marie, the other clone we're going to talk about, seemingly does not appear in the game. When we go to check her bed, she is nowhere to be found. The reason for this becomes clear later on. Both Marie and Emily were infected with the T virus, but Marie mutated much earlier. She eventually transformed into the creature we now know as the Girl. After becoming a powerful monster, she broke through the wall beside her bed and escaped from the heavily controlled environment where she had been imprisoned. If you pay close attention to the clothing worn by Emily and the Girl, you will notice why their outfits look so similar. Before Marie mutated, she wore the exact same clothes as Emily. There is also an interesting moment when Emily gets kidnapped by the Girl. We can see that the Girl treats her with a surprising amount of respect, because deep down, she still remembers her old friend Emily. In many videos, I have seen people mistakenly refer to Marie and Emily as sisters, but that is not true. Marie and Emily are clones, not sisters. An even more fascinating detail is that Marie, or the Girl, still retains a small part of her childish nature and has a strong attachment to dolls. You can discover this when you find the dolls she collected for herself inside one of the basement cells. As we know, the Girl's skin is extremely sensitive to intense light and it begins to burn when exposed to it. However, surprisingly, a normal flashlight has absolutely no effect on her. The reason for this can be understood through one of the notes left by the developers throughout the game. In one of the in-game documents, it is revealed that only strong UV lights can damage the Girl, while standard LED lights have no effect on her. Number 3, don't call him Mr. X. During one of the game's scenes, we encounter an incredibly powerful creature that looks extremely similar to Mr. X. Even Leon himself mistakenly assumes that it is actually Mr. X. However, I need to make something clear. This is not the same Mr. X we knew. This is a produced variant of him. These biological weapons were mass-produced by Umbrella Corporation, and Mr. X was simply one of them. The massive bioweapon we now encounter in Resident Evil Requiem, the one that resembles a walking tank, is another manufactured version of the same model line. Things become even more interesting when you discover the buying and selling prices of these creatures inside the Ark. This detail clearly shows that these hulking monsters were commercially traded as military weapons for wars and other combat-related purposes. Number 2, why does the Elpis vaccine work on Emily, but not on the girl? The reason for this difference in the T-virus's behavior comes down to how the host was infected. Let me explain it in more detail. If you were among those who were present during the Raccoon City incident in the past, like Leon, Sherry, and others who survived that disaster, then, according to the game's files, you would have been mildly infected with the T-virus, a condition sometimes referred to as the Raccoon City syndrome. The progression of this virus occurs in 4 stages, eventually leading to the death of the host. However, Dr. Gideon also possesses modified samples of this mild strain, which can immediately push the host directly into the final stage of infection, effectively turning them into a zombie. Most of the zombies present in the game are of this type. Now that I've fully explained the mild form of the T-virus, it's time to move on to the original strain, which I refer to as the primary T-virus. The primary T-virus was previously tested and studied on Grace's clones in ARK. The results were largely unsatisfactory. Many of the clones died almost immediately due to insufficient resistance, while the few who initially appeared to survive, such as Emily and Marie, eventually transformed into horrific monsters. In the end, none of the clones were truly resistant to the virus. The virus ultimately wipes out most of the clones within ARK. If a clone survives the initial infection, this survival has no positive effect, and the clone will still eventually transform into a monster later on. This is evident in several cases. Marie transforms into a creature known as the Girl, the Jackson brothers become monsters called Chunks, and Emily eventually transforms directly in front of us during the events of the game. Before either outcome occurs, death or full transformation, the earliest visible sign of infection progression can be observed in the host's eyes. This is why Doctor immediately examines Chloe's eyes to determine whether the infection is advancing. Eye deterioration is a key indicator of viral progression. In Emily's case, the symptoms become increasingly severe. Her eyesight is heavily affected, and she ultimately becomes nearly blind as the infection advances. However, in my interpretation, this transformation into a monster is not necessarily the absolute end of the subject. I believe even the monstrous form itself has stages. Creatures that have remained infected for a long time develop fully corrupted green eyes, indicating a permanent, irreversible state. The Girl and the Chunk variants belong to this category, with no realistic hope of recovery or reversal. On the other hand, newly transformed creatures, such as Emily at the moment of her mutation, do not yet show this advanced ocular corruption. In theory, they may still be treatable with the Elpis vaccine, which appears capable of reversing early-stage infection. This is exactly what we see in the game's ending, where Emily is successfully cured. A photograph confirms that she not only returns to her human form, but also regains her eyesight thanks to the Elpis vaccine. Furthermore, in a post-ending phone call, Grace mentions that she is teaching Emily how to read, which strongly implies that Emily has regained her vision and is recovering her normal human abilities. Number 1. Why doesn't Victor Gideon seem to care about Grace being in mortal danger? Victor, as we all know, desperately needs Grace in order to achieve his goals. She is essentially his only path to gaining access to the Elpis vaccine. However, throughout the game, we repeatedly see him acting strangely unconcerned about Grace being put in danger, or even potentially getting killed by zombies. So what could explain this contradiction? At the very least, I'd say Victor is not nearly as careless as many players initially believe. Let's start from the first section of the game. When Grace goes to the hotel, she notices the presence of an unknown figure, who is eventually revealed to be Victor Gideon. While there, Victor intentionally infects a police officer and sends him after Grace. But importantly, his goal was never to kill her. Instead, Victor was trying to confirm something. He wanted to know whether Grace was truly the chosen one Spencer had spoken about. The moment Grace gets bitten yet shows no signs of infection, Victor finally receives the proof he was looking for. The results confirm a perfect 100% match, proving that Grace is the exact subject he has been searching for all along. On top of that, Victor likely never believed the zombie could actually kill her in the first place. Grace is an FBI agent, meaning she would almost certainly be armed and trained to defend herself. But more importantly, Victor's personality plays a major role here. Victor Gideon is a man obsessed with fate and predestination. He has absolute faith in Spencer's vision and believes the entire plan is inevitable. In his mind, if Grace truly is the chosen subject, then destiny itself will ensure her survival. Because of this, he often allows events to unfold naturally instead of directly interfering. After Grace successfully passes this test, Victor actually becomes far more protective of her during the later parts of the game. For example, when he takes Grace to the care center, he keeps her restrained inside a completely isolated section of the clinic, separated from the rest of the facility by a lockdown gate. Whether the girl is there as a guardian to the restrained Grace, or is there unbeknownst to Victor, is your choice. What matters is that when Victor later orders the clinic to be infected, he seemingly does so under the assumption that Grace is still completely safe and isolated from the outbreak. Then comes the moment Leon rescues her from the girl. Victor's immediate priority is separating Grace from Leon and dealing with Leon directly. Personally, I believe Victor expected Grace to hide rather than attempt an escape, relying on her fear of the infected to keep her contained. However, by the time he finishes confronting Leon, Grace has already disappeared. Still, Victor notices that Grace has placed the moon cube. Realizing she will eventually need the sun cube as well, he simply waits there for her arrival. When Grace finally appears, Victor first tries to reason with her and convince her to cooperate. Only after she panics, runs away, and hides does he actively pursue her. After losing her a second time, Victor's actions become harder to fully interpret. The next time we see him, he is speaking with Zeno. At this point, I believe part of his overall plan involves the level 2 area. Either he still has enough faith that Grace will survive everything ahead of her, or the entire ordeal is meant to serve as yet another test. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like this lore and these mysteries, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next parts.